Hello, everyone, and welcome to RHAP. I'm your host, Taran Armstrong, and I'm here with quite a host of characters, a group of guests, and I'm very excited about it. Joining me, of course, is my co-host, Sasha. How you doing, Sasha?
So excited. We made it. We made it. The Avengers have come together. All right. That's all I can say.
The lag has been jetted from our systems, and we are here to talk to Sam, Adam, Ben, and Toby of Jetlag the Game. This is very exciting. Toby, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Hello, it's great to be here. I've seen your episodes. I know what to expect, I think. Excited to see what you guys thought of the finale, actually.
Yeah, Toby and Ben came in. They're like, yeah, we've listened to all of the things. I'm like, oh, God, what did we say?
And we're like, no, end it. We're going to cancel it all, actually.
Well, part of why I was excited to come on the podcast is this way I get to hear your reaction to the finale early. Normally I have to wait until Wednesday.
That is true. That is true. We have recorded a finale podcast already.
Wow, this is brutal. So it was pointless for me to be here.
Yeah, sorry. You can.
You lose again. Shucks.
As you heard, Adam is here. Adam, actually, I think you were the first to reach out when we dropped the first podcast. You responded on Twitter immediately. I was shocked.
Well, my friend Ian Johnson, who is a big Survivor fan, texted me very quickly, being like, my favorite Survivor podcast is covering Jetlag the Game. So it was sort of, I was in there. I was in there early.
Ooh, shout out Ian. Thank you.
Yes, and Ben is here. Ben, what have you thought of the coverage?
It's been great. It's been very thoughtful. I'm not here to talk about the show. I'm here to debut my mustache. I believe this is actually the first piece of media that will feature it.
That's true.
Ooh,
so
boy.
I realized just when we hit record, and I've been thinking about that for the last 2 minutes.
So, if you're listening to this in an audio medium, stop doing that. Go on to YouTube and then look at this. Check this shit out, because this is crazy.
Kind of matches the hat you've got, actually.
Yeah, it just
with
works.
the hat, yes.
It's way more curvy than I would expect.
The hat
or the mustache?
No, the mustache. like it looks very French in some ways, but also Italian.
Thank you.
Well, many people thought, wasn't it in Switzerland, Ben? Everybody thought you were French.
Everyone thought I was French.
Ooh.
Yeah.
We're now learning why.
Do we think this makes him more or less like a Kookaburra?
This is a really important question, Taran, and
Take a look.
Look at a
Well, I think more like an Italian Kookaburra. If that's okay.
I have been trying for months to put distance between me and the Kookaburra, so this is not doing it then.
Oh, actually, Ben, unfortunately, I think it really does, because I'm now seeing that a Kookaburra has their beak, the bottom part of their beak is sort of like an orangish, more of a flesh color, but the top part of their beak is black, much like the color of your mustache. So I actually think you've made a huge miscalculation here.
I can't
win. It definitely makes you look more like a Kookaburra.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I just think own it. What's the reason to not own it? Okay, iconic bird, iconic person. It works.
You should have seen the way that this kid said it, though.
Let me fight him.
Not a compliment.
No. Oh. Well,
everybody look at the link I sent.
Oh.
Everybody, can you put this up on YouTube for the video version?
It's because you have the hat, Ben, and there's a white, what is it, comb over for the Kookaburra? It's
right.
Yeah.
It's
this sucks.
The thing is, maybe. Okay, speaking of the way kids bully you, we do have a survivor who is what is Omer? He is a exotic pet veterinarian person, friend of the podcast. Maybe I bully him into giving you a better animal.
He did once tell me I was a bird, but I don't remember what bird it was.
Yeah, it was
I think he said it was. I think he said it was cute, but it was also supposed to be insulting.
Of course. Like I said, childhood bullies.
Now, this could be a fun challenge, is that this guy could decide which bird each of us is. And then the challenge that we have could be that we have to guess which bird we are.
I like that.
Mhm.
The challenge brain is working here. Um,
Always the writer.
of course, we are also joined by the man himself. It's Sam. How you doing, Sam?
Hello. I'm joining you from beautiful Anaheim, California. It's my favorite place on earth.
Ooh.
Is it? that was
Steve,
What's not to love?
so much sarcasm in your voice.
No.
what they got going on besides Disney, I guess. Yeah.
I want to
question.
ask you. Oh, sorry. I want to ask you guys a question, and I want you to really do some introspection before you answer. What is it about Sam that made it so that he got the introduction, the man himself, when none of us got that introduction? None of us were the man ourselves or the woman themselves.
You
Only
just don't
Sam.
have the aura.
Well, I didn't ask you, did I, Sam? I didn't.
Clearly,
ask the man
I
himself.
have the
I
aura.
asked
I am the most
Taran
masculine among us
and
at the
Sasha.
moment.
Correct.
That's true. Yeah, why wasn't Ben the man himself? Ben with his
Clearly,
incredible masculine
Well, Ben's the
energy.
Kookaburra himself,
Mhm.
unfortunately. So
Yeah.
he had a whole segment.
There's a whole vibe going on with Sam right now where like he's the furthest away from the camera. He's kind of like got like a thinking face on. And
Oh, he just took it away.
I'm sorry, Sam.
No, I just listen. This podcast is really the Toby era, right? Like that's how I see this podcast because it's the shirt, it was the earrings, right? It just the nails. Toby got it going on, but then Sam. It's Vendover Productions, right? So he gets a little bit special. That's all.
Fun fact,
Okay,
actually,
no, that's fair.
I believe this is the case. Sasha, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
but when we first talked about jet lag and discovered that we both watched it, I don't think Sasha knew that Sam was the boss.
No, I did.
Oh, you
Of course
did.
I did.
Sorry, it might have been somebody else
Yeah.
that I talked to that didn't realize it.
No, I did because I feel like as a Slytherin that I am, I was like, oh, it's really interesting that folks like love Ben and Adam so much. Like sometimes they're like, oh, the boss versus everyone else, whatever that may mean, even though y'all have equal stake in everything. I don't, I like the people that should win. You see what I'm saying?
Mm.
That's how I feel. So that's
and who
why I
should win?
always knew this guy.
Yeah, I was about to
I'm
say
just not
that's
an underdog girly. That's all. And the fact that Sam always wins with girls, what more do I need? You know what I'm saying?
Am I the underdog girly?
Yes, you're the underdog girlies, but the girlies are never the underdog. Does that make sense?
Very true.
Yeah, so I have no reason but to stand you. Anyway.
Although, depending on how you crunch the numbers, I'm no longer the underdog, actually.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I
Ooh.
don't like underdogs. Like
if you count Crime Spree, Sam is
Ooh.
tied for all-time wins. with
Do you
me.
count Crime Spree though?
Debatable whether you include
you
that,
all
but at
do.
least by
You have
one
to.
metric. Yeah.
I didn't realize that. That pisses me off.
Yeah, it's
I
true. It puts
love
me and
it.
Sam at 5 and you at 4. But it puts
So-
Toby, most importantly, at a 100%.
Hey, but you've got the
win
mustache,
rate.
Ben.
Mm.
So
It's true.
Yeah, Toby, I think statistically is the best jet lag player.
this is
2
this
out
is
of 2, yeah.
remarkable.
I don't know if I could have held that up over as many seasons as the guys have done, but I'm very happy to have a 2 out of 2. I'll say that.
At 2 for 2, do you then say I go out on top, or do you go back again for another try?
I might have to quit while I'm ahead. I don't know. Who knows what the future holds?
Billions of hearts, mine breaking right now.
Okay, so obviously, just to do a bit more of an introduction for who maybe we are, if you're a jet lag fan, you're watching this and you're like, who are these people that are interviewing my jet lag people? We come from a place of like covering reality television. In particular, I'm like the kind of the Big Brother guy. Like I talk about Big Brother. I'm like a weirdo and I cover the live feeds of Big Brother and I update people on what happens on the live feeds. Yeah, sorry, you've walked into a freak show. And so
He does watch people sleep. Yes.
do we watch people sleep occasionally? And
How
we
much
talk
would
a
you
lot
pay
about
for a live stream of Ben sleeping?
it would, I think so. I think get Ben on Big Brother.
No, I think he asked how much would you, Taran, pay
Oh, how much would I
Ooh.
pay
Yeah.
for a live
for
stream?
a live stream of Ben?
You could
Well,
cover
this is the
that.
thing. The sleeping is probably the least interesting part, but a live stream of
Not
Ben always.
my sleep stream. I mean, I'm not gonna no spoilers, but
Oh,
once we
boy.
get that pumping, who know? You never know what's gonna happen.
Is this a subscription service? Is this
I
a
don't know, I'm
Nebula
just-
perk?
Only
We'll work
sleep.
out a
I'm-
deal.
Checking what
We
the
can work out a
market is
lifetime
like.
deal if you were willing to really pony up now.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, come on, Taran. Let's make this work.
I think
gold
there's
mine.
something here.
Okay, we can talk. We can take this offline.
So what I really like to analyze, of course, is the strategy of Big Brother. It's a really interesting game. And I found you guys on YouTube, started watching Jet. Like, I've seen all of Amazing Race. I love Taskmaster. We watch a lot of these shows. And so what I've kind of been pushing for in the last like year or so is that like we should be covering more of what's happening on YouTube, because I think that there's a lot of interesting things in the reality space happening there, whereas like broadcast television, streaming networks, there's a lot of competition out there in the competition genre right now, but it still kind of tends to follow the same formulas. And what you guys do, I think, is really interesting. And I'm curious to know about like the inception of like how you got here and what your sort of reality TV background is.
None.
Ooh.
I mean, I personally think that part of the strength of digital media is that it does not funnel through some of the development pipelines that you do get traditional reality TV out of, because I think what you do see is like everything sort of ends up as a bit of a, there's a standard format and everything's just like a certain level of deviation from that standard format. And I think what led to some of the strength of Jetlag is that we sort of approach this from a development perspective from a very different place, where like I don't think the words reality TV ever came out of our mouths.
Mm-hmm.
Never even considered it as anything similar to that. I mean, I think the most we'd ever talked about was the equivalence to The Amazing Race, being the most similar show in some ways, but also in other ways, what we were trying to do is remove the core reality TV elements from The Amazing Race.
Yeah.
Like we sort of saw that as some of the weaknesses, or at least we saw some ability to remove some of the things that attached it to this format that is somewhat similar across reality television, in order to create something different, still within the context of competition travel shows.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Like, I think anyone would make the assumption that the more money you throw at a show like this, the more options you're gonna have, and like the more flexible you're gonna be in the way that you design these games. But I actually think that like if we had the budget of The Amazing Race, it would hamper us greatly. Like there are a lot of things that The Amazing, like with the camera crews that they have and the amount of liability that they have and the number of people that they have involved, they can't do a lot of the things that we're able to do because of the fact that we are so much smaller of a production. And so like, I think it's easy to just, dismiss it as like, oh, it's like a cheap version of The Amazing Race. But the interesting thing is that actually opens up a bunch of doors that the producers of The Amazing Race don't have access to.
But I think I read part of y'all's question as like, what's our relationship to reality TV? Not just that we technically like, do we have a development background?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we can also answer that, which is that like, I think I had one of the least developed relationships to reality TV of you guys, because Sam, you were an Amazing Race viewer, right?
Casually, but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what I would say is like I wanted to love The Amazing Race,
Right.
Yeah.
because I loved it as a format.
I think that's most
it's
Amazing
just-
Race fans.
Yeah, it's like I love the idea here, but I do feel like there is a better way to execute on this idea, and that's kind of what this was. But yeah.
Yeah. I liked reality competition. Like I mean, when we were creating the show, I think Sam, you and I were both starting to get into Taskmaster. which was definitely an influence on the show. I was like talking a lot about Taskmaster. And yeah, I liked Chopped. Chopped was a show that I quite enjoyed. But Ben, definitely, you for sure watched the most reality TV of the three of us.
Yeah, I'm a total degenerate.
I mean, you're in great
You know,
company.
almost every season of Survivor, most seasons of The Amazing Race, every dating show that's ever been made. So, you know, I was excited. My mom was very excited. We watched reality TV growing up together, and she never thought that she was going to be of any help to me in my career, but now she takes a lot of credit. I'm curious, Toby, you know, how do you feel having become a reality TV star in a sense?
Well, I mean, on your comment, I too feel like I've watched a lot of reality TV over the years. I feel like I've dipped a toe in like every genre. I too have watched, you know, a good number of dating shows. I've watched The Bachelor, Married at First Sight, and I've like watched everything from that to Survivor and The Amazing Race. So I feel like I've watched probably too much to be good for me. But then you invite me on a show like this, and I'm like, oh wow, all that time I wasted and procrastinated in the past comes in handy. So I was like, can justify my procrastination habits with something like this.
Well, Toby, like, what drew you to jet lag when you found the show, or maybe you like heard of it from these guys first?
Well, I mean, I'd viewed the first few seasons of the show before there was any inkling of me coming on, and I just enjoyed it as a fan. Like, it was a really well-made show, and I enjoyed. There's something in it, the way you guys edit it, that it's like addicting. I don't know if you like lace it with some kind of drug, but it's like watching jet lag for me. The seasons I'm not on, it's like, you know, I can't wait to see the next episode, and I think a lot of the fans feel that too, and that's one of the reasons it's so popular. So yeah, like the early seasons, I was like, this is a cool show. And then, you know, I knew Sam and had met Adam and Ben previously, and then got invited on, and I was like, wow, this is amazing for me. I'd love to do it.
I think that, like, speaking to the addictive nature of it, I think that one of the main differences between jet lag and some of these more established competition shows, maybe we'll call them, is that jet lag, every episode can be completely different than the previous one. So, like, I think that there's a world, the world where competition reality existed was every week or maybe every couple of days, depending on the show, you'd tune in, you'd see the same thing, the same formula. And that was like how you viewed these shows. But, and certainly jet lag releases on a weekly schedule, but like, every episode of jet lag just can go in any direction. So you always want to see what comes next because you never know what is going to come next. And I think that's like a huge strength of it, and something that like other shows don't really do.
Yeah, and I particularly, Sam, to your point, I also wanted to say that as an Amazing Race stan, I agree with you in that there are so many things the Amazing Race could do better. And actually, that's what I felt about the finale specifically. I miss airport drama. The Amazing Race killed it with the airport drama. These fools are bumbling everywhere. And that was what was fun to watch on The Amazing Race. And I missed that on the game design. And that's why jet lag, I think I felt an immediate connection to, because I said, oh, this is what I'm missing with my reality TV. Here it is.
And this is actually something that, you know, we talked about pretty actively, well, constantly, but also, you know, pretty early on, is like that potential of at any moment you could decide, oh, I'm going to go to the complete other side of the country, or in some cases to a completely other country, or what country I go to is going to be decided by what direction this rat on a live stream from, I don't remember, was it the National Zoo, I think?
It's a Smithsonian Zoo, I think. Yeah.
What direction a rat 4,000 miles away runs is going to decide which country I go to. That's exciting. And I think when we develop new games, we try to think about how do we expand the scope of the potential at any given moment. How crazy can the implications of tiny, ridiculous little moments can be?
Well, there was definitely a lot of discussion, I remember, about like the level of rails to put on it. And then also, like, I remember even back with Crime Spree, we talked about, like, we really want it to be possible for you to make a mistake and end up in completely the wrong place. Like, which, you know, not to get too spoilery, happens at a certain point in Crime Spree where just like a mistake is made and people are fully just like in the wrong part of the country on account of that mistake. And the possibility for there to be like a mistake that could lead you that far astray, I think the promise that like that could happen at any point is part of what keeps you watching, right? I think that a lot of reality shows, in part, I think, Taran, as you point out, like because they have to follow a format, or like as Sam points out, I think this is really significant too, like because, or no, I guess maybe it was Ben, because the amount of people and infrastructure and the permits and the camera crews and just all this stuff, like it has to be, you know, the Amazing Race has to know, like, we start in this country, we go here, then we go on all of, now they're like, they just split a private plane, right? They don't even go to the airport anymore, but it's
they're
like,
back
then,
to, thankfully, airport again.
okay, well, that's
but
good.
yeah.
But yeah, it's like, then we're going to go to this country and then we're going to go here, because you have to plan. And like in our show, it's like, we could do anything at any point. It's like, you don't know. And like, we don't know. And I think that that world of possibility is enabled by the, you know, the more lo-fi version of it.
That was one of the biggest things for us, is like, you know, again, we'd seen quite a bit of The Amazing Race, but it really is like so devastating that it's like, well, they're never going to go to the wrong country. Like, they're never going to get on the wrong plane. That can't happen in The Amazing Race. And like, it would be so cool if it could. You know, at most it's like, oh, the taxi went to the wrong place, and then it like delays them by a half an hour. But who cares about that?
Yeah, the Amazing Race was never better than when Boston Rob from Survivor was like, "You got to let me on that plane." Like, you know, like, and now we have, you know, Ben and Adam being like, "We're doing something really stupid."
Sort of a classic line.
I also not. Taran covers, I feel like, a lot of the strategy piece of stuff, and I feel like I am the person that comes into reality TV. I also am a degenerate. I watch everything. I don't care. It's very exciting to me. And I think I studied people in college. So that's why I find human dynamics really interesting. And I'd love to hear from y'all. You know, you created the game, and you've talked a lot about on other interviews about your competitive spirit, especially Sam and Adam, and how y'all have had to work through that to make sure the best version of yourselves, whatever that may mean, comes out onto the show. But I'd love to hear, you know, you're creating the game, but how do you still find ways to game the system or not game the system? Like, how do you either hold yourself back as a competitive person or not? Because I'm messy, and even if I made something, I'm still gonna try to ruin it to win.
Well, I think a lot of it, almost all of it, is in the original game design. Because I think one thing that we often talk about is like, we want to be able to play the fullest version of the game possible. We want, like, once we start out, it's like a completely different human. We're now in our competitor mindset, and that means that, like, kind of whatever is within the bounds of the rules, fair game, no holding back. But what that means is that we have to create really, really good rules so that we are able to stretch them and push them to their fullest extent. And I think that is sort of broadly just something that we've gotten better at through time. Earlier on, I think we just honestly didn't have enough experience to close a lot of the loopholes, and also to really have a good understanding of what we were going for. You know, I think, like Adam alluded to, we took inspiration from Taskmaster early on, and one issue we sort of learned is that, like, at sometimes we perceived challenges as Taskmaster-esque, where it's kind of all about what is a creative interpretation of what's going on. The audience perceived it as, like, I don't know, I guess more Amazing Race style, where it's like, there is one correct way of doing things. there's not really any encouragement of creativity and all that. And ultimately, we want to create an experience that's enjoyable for the audience. So we sort of had to, in later seasons, pivot to both writing and then interpreting the challenges in a more strict way, so that there is clearly just like an objective, definition of success, and therefore that we can judge it very accurately. And that also means that, like, on our end, we're no longer really looking for creative interpretations. We sort of understand what is the way we intend to complete the challenge, and we'll do it that way. And sometimes there's actually issues with, like, we maybe don't describe what we intended the right way. But at least we are agreed on intention. Like, for example, none of us knew what a drop kick was in Australia, or
In
a
New
drop
Zealand.
goal, or New Zealand. And I think we had talked about how we intended it to be completed, but it turns out we described it the wrong way in the card. Sort of actually a similar thing came up actually with the golf too, where I don't think any of us fully understood the rules of golf, and what out of bounds was in the description of the challenge. So, like, there are sometimes these issues of like actually describing what we intend, but we at least understand what we intend.
Well, I'm curious, Toby, because you come up with what seems as though the game-winning strategy in the Australian season, and which is to go to the Gold Coast airport and be able to go back and forth between the border. And so this was really interesting to me as somebody that loves to try to break games, like being the person who comes up with the game, also trying to potentially break the game. I feel like you might not be as aggressively trying to figure that out, but I think you were certainly, I think, involved in some of the game design process, but obviously not as much as the other three. Do you think that freed you up to, like, think a little more creatively?
Yes, I'd say I wasn't really involved at all in the game design process. I kind of just showed up and, the guys were like, this is what we've got, this is what we've come up with. And then I kind of had to just learn what they had in mind and learn what they'd intended. The Gold Coast thing was interesting because, in fact, Sam and I hadn't discussed on our own any kind of strategy at all until the game started. And so we hadn't even had a single discussion of, like, this is what we hope to do or what. So, like, the first day was kind of like spewing all of our thoughts to each other of, like, these are potential places I'd like to go or things to do. And the Gold Coast thing came up as one of them that I really did just find on scrolling around on Google Maps on the first day, the bus to Bondi Beach. And yeah, like, I was really excited to see it. And I even made a comment on the last day, the finale, that I don't think it gets into the episode, where I was like, oh no, are we breaking the game? Because I started to feel like, when we got a text from Adam being like, that would have been nice to know about, I was like, oh no, have we done something wrong? Like, we've found an exploit that we didn't tell them about or whatever. But I think it was fair game in the end. But yeah, it was something that couldn't have been pre-planned though, because the night before starting the first day, rules were still changing, decisions were still being made about where you had to be to deposit, and the decision of being anywhere in the state to deposit was made that night. So yeah, there wasn't a lot of pre-planning that I could do before showing up to the game.
And to be clear, I don't think that comes even close to.
No, not at all. Well, I mean, I think that's especially proven by the fact that Ben and I were trying to do the exact same thing in a different region.
Yeah. We didn't know that at the time, though. At least I only found that out watching the finale.
But I think this is kind of what's fun about the show, is that once we do set those strict rules, there are still ways that we can play within those rules in unanticipated ways.
Right.
And it shows that, like, people often are surprised that we are able to truly competitively play a game that we designed. But, from my perspective, it's not that surprising. I mean, you can design soccer and it still be a good game to play.
Exactly. I think that's actually a way that I often try to explain to people, like, how the show is designed, is that, like, when we were first creating the show, like, we had this problem, sort of, you could think of it as a problem, which is like, well, the people who design the games are going to be the people who play the games. And in most reality competition shows, this would be a huge issue. The person who designs a season of The Amazing Race would absolutely clean up when it came time to compete in that season of The Amazing Race, because they would be able to plan everything they were doing. But we were like, well, if you design it more like a board game with like randomness and optionality, it's like, you know, like Sam said, the guy that designed the game soccer would not necessarily beat you at soccer. Like the guy that designed Monopoly would not necessarily, or maybe it was a woman who designed Monopoly, actually, I think. The person who designed Monopoly would not necessarily beat you at Monopoly, right? Like when games are well designed, you can compete fully within them, even with full knowledge of how they are designed and all the rules, and you can compete like very fully.
And
I think sometimes it actually challenges us to make better games. Go ahead, Ben.
We always discover unexpected things every time we play, no matter how many, like, because again, we sort of simulate playing these games before we play them on like a computer, and you know we'll gain quite a bit of knowledge, but every single game we've played, no matter how many times we've tested it, we discover stuff while we're playing it invariably. And I'm sure if we played the game again, we would discover new things.
Yeah.
I think that
this one again, it would be crazy. Like TRALIA Part 2, it would be crazy. I don't know what would happen.
Totally different. Totally different. And like we did not get to test this game as much as we normally get to test games. But ultimately, I thought that was quite good, because things like the Gold Coast thing and the Canberra thing, I think we probably would have found those if we had been testing more, but I'm glad we didn't.
Yeah, in our like practice simulation that we did, which was just a Zoom call with us being like, oh, we might go here and then here. I think we only did like the first 2 days of gameplay. So we never really simulated the finale, which I think is why surprising things happen on that day, because I don't think any of us knew how that last few hours, which is a really crucial time in the game, would actually be approached.
It was so interesting to see like not only how the game was played in that final day, but how it was edited together, because there's so much of it is cerebral. Like so much of it is just kind of like planning and thinking like, well, if they do this, then we need to do this, and like figuring out all the different things. But it was put together in such a way that it was really compelling. And that's like, I think, such a testament to the way that you've edited it.
There was one version of this that I'm a little bit disappointed didn't pan out, where, because I was pretty sure from my perspective, Ben and Adam, basically what happened where Ben and Adam thought they were going to win and were like pretty confident that they were about to win. So unfortunately, Adam realized what we were doing while he was airborne. But my plan had been to, bit of a BTS thing, but I knew that everyone would be okay with it, to sort of fudge the rules a bit and turn off our tracker before we landed in Gold Coast, and then pretend like there was an issue or something, and then let them call us, do like a whole big disappointed, oh no, and then reveal. Toby and I had actually like discussed this, and I think in full, and then like walk over the border and be like, anyway, it's to show you that this is authentic, that we didn't do that, because anyway, but that would have been fun.
Well, it's interesting, and I actually just realized this because Ben brought it up. We didn't simulate the end game of this. We actually, I think, often don't simulate the final day of games, because partially just because it takes a really long time to run a full simulation. Like, so typically what we'll do is like, we make sure that the bones of the game work and all of the like functionality works. And we'll simulate the first day or something, or sometimes the first two. But I actually am now, and I hadn't even thought about this, we almost never simulate the ends of games. And I think that actually it's good that we don't do that, because then new end game strategies become genuinely like in the moment you come up with them.
And I think that's often where the most creative strategies are found. So I think that is good, because like I know I wouldn't want to give away my good strategies in a simulation.
Right.
Yeah. My first thought when we sort of saw the rules of this game, and I've talked about this on the podcast, so I'm sure if you
would have flown around and gotten all the welcome bonuses.
Yes.
Oh, that was my question.
Is that a good
Okay,
strategy?
great.
Please tell me if it's a good strategy or if I'm missing something.
I've actually thought a lot about this.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is unsatisfying in that I'm not sure, but I'm not convinced that it's as good of a strategy as you think, because here is my argument against this. the most powerful thing that you can do in this game is to be behind the other team.
Mhm.
And so if one team just starts going around and just depositing like $1 down everywhere, you're going to eat up your whole, what? First
At
day
least
and a
2 days.
half, 2 days,
I'd say
probably, if
2.
you're dealing with
To do
Perth.
WA too. Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to end all of that with probably no money to speak of, right? And you're going to have put down weak deposits everywhere. And it's going to be very easy, especially if the other team is taking a strategy of just focus on, call it 4 regions, and you choose your regions well. And it's like Queensland, New South Wales, Australian Capital Territory, and then maybe Tasmania or maybe South Australia. It's like, while I'm out there messing around, putting down $1 in Perth, like they're going to be there solidifying their territory, putting up a big balance where now all of a sudden it's day 2. I have $600. They've got $5,000 because they've actually been doing challenges. And now, because of the exponential nature of how you increase your money in this game, you're kind of screwed. And the other thing too is that you could imagine a situation where if you're keeping your balance, like, well, actually, I don't know if this is that much of a problem or not, but like if your balance got stolen in a place before you could book your next flight, you would also then have to go and do a challenge anyway, which I think once a team realized the other team was doing that, they might have considered that as well. Another thing, frankly, too, though, is like, that show would have sucked, man.
Yeah.
Come on.
For all the talk of like, we're a different person once we start, I think we all do have a bias towards like, we do want it to be entertaining. So, I think what that basically means, like, if there are opportunities where it's like these two things are equal strategic value, but this thing's more entertaining, we're going to do the more entertaining thing. And this is kind of one of those cases. But also another part that I think is sometimes difficult for the audience to pick up on is how much of a constraint flight schedules and prices are. Because of course we're looking at dozens, sometimes hundreds of options, and then the audience, it's often boiled down to, in this season at best like 2 or 3. So particularly, I think actually on the earlier days of this season, there were some real like kind of anomalous expensive flight routes. Like apparently someone, I forget, I saw some explanation somewhere for why the Adelaide flights were so expensive in the end.
Okay, I would love to know the answer to this.
Oh, you don't remember? I think it was like, I forget exactly what it was. I think it was it the Adelaide Cup or something? Or no, it wasn't
I
that.
think there was like a festival. There was like a music
it was something big in Adelaide that day.
Yeah.
I don't know. But anyway, so like it is rarely the case that you can just be in like Canberra, for example, and have cheap flights to all 7 other regions, especially because, some regions, like, I don't think you can even go like Canberra, Perth, for example. You certainly can't go Canberra, Alice Springs. Like, there are some permutations that don't exist. There are other permutations that, like, I mean, Toby and I saw that like Canberra, Adelaide, that happens 3 times per day, and they're all very expensive. So the flight constraint would be significant. And I think the only way to get around that constraint meaningfully would be to pay a lot for flights, and sometimes potentially more than $750.
More than welcome.
Yeah,
Actually,
I
quite
definitely.
often.
Sorry.
I
I would say
considered deeply.
sorry,
that
go ahead, Toby.
strategy.
Go ahead,
Oh,
Toby.
sorry. Taran's strategy of jumping between the regions and collecting all the welcome bonuses, I did deeply consider, and Sam and I, you'll hear us say on the first day, like, oh, we can either stay in Sydney or go to Melbourne straight away. And that go to Melbourne straight away was kind of, do we want to do that strategy? Like, do we want to go to Melbourne, get a welcome bonus, and from Melbourne, that's the best place to kind of go in a star to any of the other regions you want to get. But when I thought about it and even wrote down, like, how long would it take us to travel to all the regions, the time it takes, if you could spend that same time doing a few really good challenges and getting even potentially better than we ended up doing with the challenges, you could get really rich and be in a much better position game-wise. So ultimately, I think it's not the winning strategy, but it could be in another version of the game, perhaps.
Here would be my simplest argument against it, which is that imagine one team does that and the other team does the normal way you would play the game. It's the start of day 3. I did your idea, Taran, and I have Northern Territory, Western Australia, call it, South, Victoria, Tasmania, and I have $1 down in each. The other team has Queensland, New South Wales, Capital Territory, and South Australia with like $1,500 each. I would argue that they're now in a better position than I am because my early deposits down in all those spots are now, they were useless, right? I wasn't able to put down a good deposit and they were going to go to territories anyway. And so once they see that I'm doing that, they'll just start following me.
I think that perhaps the thing that was hard to translate is what you talked about, the timing of like how long it would take to actually go through and do all of it. And in the meantime, you're right. The other team is just going to be racking up money and putting money down. Very important question that we have pondered on this podcast. What did you do with the knives?
Oh yeah. Well, there's actually a funny story about the knives.
Yeah.
The saw we threw away, which I felt bad about. That we wasted a perfectly good saw. I think we had talked about. I had said to Ben to go and try to return them, but I think that didn't work. And then
no, it did not. Yeah.
The knives are actually a funny story. The answer is that we threw away the knives. But what we actually had forgotten about the knives and they were in my backpack and I was in the airport about to walk through security, like getting my backpack to put it on the thing when I realized that I still had the knives and I went and threw the knives away before I put my backpack through, which I can't imagine was a very good look. I sort of tried to do it very non-conspicuously. Like I sort of went over to a further trash can and just kind of like dumped something in it and went back. But then going back to the security, I was like, this could go really bad for me.
They don't have amnesty boxes for knives at airports.
Well, a lot of commenters pointed out also the fact that in Australia, you're not allowed to carry a knife without a good reason.
Well, I had a good reason, Sam. I was trying to beat you in a game.
You did have a good reason. But then,
the reason was that we needed to sharpen a Lego rewards card.
Right, but then that had been done. So,
well, what if we needed to do it again? You don't know what's going to come up.
Listen, I'm not a Australian. What do they call it there? It's something ridiculous.
Like a barrister or something.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
The TSA is called that, or
lawyer.
No.
Oh yeah, okay. In India, they're called that too. That makes sense. Colonization.
Colonialism.
Yes. Yeah, because as a brown person, I will say that was the most fascinating thing to watch. Is just folks like in the airport, just yelling, screaming, or Yes, please tell me more.
We can do anything.
It's really exciting. It truly is exciting.
I love that I will burn their territory to the ground.
Yeah, and I'm just imagine me, like an Indian immigrant, like who had 4 S's on my boarding pass at one point, to yelling that in the airport.
I think in that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sam.
Well, yeah. The honestly, traveling around the world as a bunch of white boys who are actually, we're all 24 or older, right, Ben?
I am 25 years old.
In fact, 25 and older.
Do you see the mustache?
Or older?
Yeah.
Sorry,
it's giving prefrontal cortex.
But I think we have the benefit of all potentially looking a little bit younger than we are, and therefore can just be perceived as like a bunch of clueless young American backpackers bumbling around the world, vlogging on our iPhones. It can be a bit of a cheap code at times to getting away with stuff in a way. It's sort of in the same vein as the whole anti-Amazing Race production style stuff.
There are some things I genuinely don't think we would have finished season 2 where we circumnavigated the world if we were not white. Like I just don't think it would have we would have gotten stopped. there were a number of places along the way where it was a little touch and go.
Yeah, that's valid.
Yeah. Especially
No, I just-
Singapore. Like, you
Yes.
shouldn't be that concerned about Singapore, but you know, they have like the immigration card that you fill out that says like drug mules will get punished by
Mhm.
death.
Yeah,
like,
you
literally
have to
says that.
sign something when
Yeah.
you go into
Yeah.
Singapore that's like, if you sell drugs in our country, we will execute you. And you have to be
And
like,
you know, they
yes.
literally do. And you know, the facility that they have for that, it's actually like at the end of the runway at the airport. Like, you don't even go far.
Mhm.
Because the way they execute you is that you're run over by a plane.
Oh yes, it's complete facts, no lies here. No, listen, Singapore. I mean, even chewing gum is an issue. It's like, imagine everything else. So what a beautiful country, but bless, it's stressful. I'd also love to hear, Toby, from you, as someone, right, that is from that region. Were there any specific tasks you were looking forward to that didn't end up happening, a la Sam F1 moment?
Oh, I'm not sure actually if there was a challenge I was
Mhm.
particularly looking forward to. I was just excited to show off the country as a whole because I knew it was the first time that Australia was going to be showcased. I know Adam and Ben had been to Sydney before in an episode, but we hadn't seen anything really quintessentially Australian. I'm glad that we got the wallaby in from Adam and Ben's perspective. I think that was essential to make it in somewhere somehow. But no, I feel like I was happy with how it went. Yeah.
You were like somewhat interested in going to Alice Springs personally, right?
Yeah, I hadn't been there and I still haven't been to Alice Springs. So that one is still on the bucket list. Maybe next time.
Just gonna call up.
Well, I think it shows how much of a true competitor Toby is, where it's like, we're never going to Alice Springs because we were on the same page about like not worth it strategically, despite the fact that like I'm in the same boat. Like I've actually weirdly have been to Alice Springs, but I would love to have gone back. And especially for me, I really wanted to go to Perth personally because I've never been to. I actually used to live in Australia, so I've been to various bits, but I've never been to WA. And I was interested in going, but not strategically. And I think Toby was on the same page where it's
watching Adam and Ben in Northern Territory, it's like, when a tourist comes to your hometown or your country and they go and do all the cool, fun things that you've never done as a local. That's kind of what it felt like. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that.
I imagine Toby behind the scenes when the cameras are not rolling, just being like really hardcore, just like Sam, shut up. We're not going there. We need to win. I'm the winningest jet lag competitor.
I definitely wanted to win, but there's not a lot of ways you can guarantee it in a game like this rather than just continuously being on your toes every day. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like you go.
I mean, I think that Toby and I off camera had a very useful kind of strategic back and forth where like Toby was very willing and very capable of getting into some like deep analytical work in a way that I'm not. So I think like, combining some of that analytical work with some of my experience on more jet lag seasons really had like complementary skill sets to be able to match those two things together into really strongly formulated strategy. Toby's generally nice to me off camera.
Well, you see a little bit of this that like would normally super get cut, but that we included because we were trying to like have some fun with being very vague about their strategy in the final episode, where they're on the bus and Toby is doing all this math and she's just like reading out numbers. She's just like, sorry, Toby, I'm going to do your accent. See if I can do it. 280.
Do you need to?
1,423 minus. Well, yeah, that would work. And so you see a little montage of that. One really quick thing I'll say about behind the scenes that I always think is funny is we always get asked like, what are things like behind the scenes of jet lag? And I'm like, you're watching it, man. Yeah. It's like the whole show is kind of behind the scenes. Like,
well, I remember like
the scenes is we're sitting on the bus. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, and like we're doing research and we're doing math and we're doing like I remember like Toby and I on day one, I remember we were sitting on the bus in Gold Coast and I was like, Toby, I realized like for all of the time we sat together next to each other in that car in New Zealand, like we were just always talking about the game. And it's like, tell me about your family. And then so I learned about Toby's family.
That's
and
nice.
like, yeah, because I was like, because and it's kind of always the same thing. I mean, less so for y'all's side because you obviously, know each other outside of the game. But like, in many cases with these guests, well, I mean, I've known every guest before the game, but like when we're in the game, it's like, it's just fully the game. And it's like, it's not really, there's not like hangout time. And if that happens, it's like a very isolated thing. So it's kind of funny to like, it's almost just like we're coworkers for like 5 days or something.
There's no time for chit chat. It's very serious business. And there's like a few shots even throughout the show where I'm on my phone in the shot. And I just want to say, I'm never like on Instagram or on Twitter. I'm always on Google Flights. What is the next flight to like Canberra? How much for this flight to this flight? Like that's anytime you see me on my phone in the season, I'm on Google Flights pretty much.
Oh,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying, as a viewer, I don't think I have ever felt that way. In fact, I see you very much as like this genius that just knows everything, and that everyone should just follow along because the way you speak about math, and I mean, again, that's what you do for a living, but the way you talk about just STEM in general, it feels so exciting. And again, I need that little Chiron on the side, right? That says Toby is speaking a lot about this, but don't worry, you don't need to understand this because I'm like, well, if I don't understand Toby, do I lose? Is that the point of this? So it feels really exciting to actually like in the edit watch the way you do it and the way your strategy works.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Thank you for the kind words. I will say, like, sometimes the math comes in handy. Sometimes the math is all just overfitting because something else random happens and it doesn't matter. So it balances out.
Well, but I do think it's interesting, Toby, like sort of as you mentioned, very, very intentionally, the games are designed such that you have to be highly responsive to a number of different variables. Like, not only, the biggest one usually being what the other team is doing, but any number of things, which means that there's always room to be optimizing further. There's always room to be gaming out. Well, if they do this, then we do this. Well, if we, fail at this challenge, we do this. If we get this money, then this happens. If this flight changes, then that, like all of this stuff, like there is always further optimization that can be done, which is, again, very intentional in the game. Like one thing that we really don't want in the game design is, well, we've planned out our strategy for the day. So now it's time to just sit tight and do it. And like, especially in this game, we were worried about like, we had to be really intentional because we saw there's a version of this game, if it was designed slightly differently, where it was like, yeah, we just planned out the next 3 days. Like, we're just going to do this. And so like having those variables, having that responsiveness built in is important to keep the game exciting, but it also means that, like there's never a moment where you couldn't make yourself do a slightly better job by continuing to do research.
All right, let me give you one final kind of like serious question.
Yeah. And then I have one silly one to end.
Okay. Because I want to talk, and I'm sure you can't talk too much about it, but I want to talk about the Getaway.
Ooh, yes.
And how that kind of fits into what I mentioned at the start about like, this is like a new, this seems like it's even more in the reality genre than jet lag, which is much more competition. This is a little more, it's still a competition, I imagine, but more reality. And the trailer is very fun. And we talked about it, and Ben, you have the best part in the trailer.
Period. Yes.
We just thought it would be funny.
Idea.
And it's a funny idea. So it is this, first of all, maybe talk a little bit about the Getaway in terms of what you can say about it. But also like, how do you feel about it in terms of the direction you're heading for this kind of show creation, content creation?
Yeah, so it sounds like, yeah, you've seen the trailer, which means that you understand the full premise, which for the audience is essentially we've taken a fairly traditional kind of I guess maybe the close equivalent would be a show like The Mole, where there's essentially
traders. Yeah.
or the traders, where there's essentially a saboteur or someone who's in the midst, who's working against the team. However, we've just convinced every single person that they are that one person who is the traitor or the mole or the saboteur or whatever you want to call it. They are the one person working against the team, except every individual thinks that. And there is no team. Well, there sort of is a team. They're just all
What's interesting is
team.
they actually are on the same team.
Yeah.
They simply don't realize it. That's
I said
part
it
of
was
the
like
fun.
it's like a reverse Joe Schmo.
Yeah.
If you guys know the Joe Schmo show.
Yep.
But yeah, it's definitely structured in some ways much more like a typical reality show, in that like we very much wanted to mimic a common style. However, it's also very atypical in the fact that like we're completely breaking that style. And also a key aspect of this show is what we are calling internally kind of like the BTS layer, which is essentially watching us orchestrate this, because it was, I mean, I don't think it even remotely comes through how complicated it was to convince everyone. Because like there's not only directly what you tell them, we also were like very committed to like we're never telling a lie. Everything that we tell them is 100%
That was a big
true.
thing. Yeah, we don't ever lie to them.
Yeah, so like how do we guide them towards this conclusion without directly lying to them? Then there's also the thing that you don't necessarily think about, that like we have a 25-person traveling party. We have what is that, 17, 16 crew, and some of these crew are like just like
19.
Hired sound mixer who shows up an hour before we start rolling in Las Vegas, and like we need to get him up to speed and make sure he doesn't spill the beans or stuff like that. One crew member actually didn't. We told him the full premise. He just like
He wasn't paying attention.
He's just nodding along. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, sure.
And then like day 4, he comes to us and it's like, wait, I think I've got it.
Unserious people.
He told us that like because he was one of the gaffers, so he was there for all the confessionals, and he was like, yeah, at first I was like, oh man, I think Steven's got to be the snitch, but then later I was like, no, it seems like it's Georgia. And he was like, well, there was a really funny thing too, where like sometimes for certain challenge sites, we had like the employee, the person who ran it or worked there, whatever, was around, to help facilitate the, using the site. And they would sometimes be watching the confessionals, and we had to like go over to them and be like, you're about to hear stuff that isn't going to make sense to you. Like, just don't, like a few times I think we told them what it was, and other times we were just like, just don't react to anything. Or we would have a crew member like distract them and go somewhere else. Because the last thing we wanted was like the lady that ran, well, actually, I can't say what any of the sites are, with a person, one of the people who ran one of the sites who's watching on, hearing one person be like, yeah, well, I'm the snitch, so I did all this stuff. And then the next person being like, yeah, well, I'm the snitch, so I did all this stuff. And she's like, I don't want them to clock her being like, wait a minute, what's going on? And then they start to,
because all it would take is like one quick comment,
one little,
and then everything comes crashing down.
One little, anyway, you're the snitch. The person before said that they were. How does the game work? Like,
so all that is to say, like, are we dipping our toes into traditional reality television? Kind of the point was like, we wanted to convince them that we were starting to dip our toes into traditional reality television, but we weren't. All that being said, look, CBS executive watching this, if you want to give us $15 million, we will make you the best reality show you've ever seen. But
I think what's fun about the show, one of the things I think is fun about the show is that like it is still a genuine competition that works and is well balanced, and that you can win through playing well. the players don't understand the full premise, but they are all working with the same information. And it is like, because there were versions of the show in early development where like it wasn't a fair competition, where we were like, oh, well, like what if we rigged votes, and then that would be really funny, and like we would do all this stuff. And ultimately we were like, no, like the only way it's going to be satisfying is if it fully does work as a reality competition show, with them all trying their best, with them genuinely competing. They all have the same information. It's just that there's this one thing that all of them don't know. But nonetheless, the incentives still kind of all work out, which I think makes it so like you can enjoy it as just a reality competition show, and you can also enjoy it as like this bigger premise kind of thing.
Is this
So I think
kind of
it'll
like...
be
Sorry,
well,
go ahead.
I think for engaged viewers such as yourselves, it'll be very interesting to follow like how a social strategy game works when nothing makes sense.
Yeah.
Like everything that people think they're learning is wrong. And how does that affect the dynamics, the social dynamics?
Yeah.
Because it does create some very strange
The incentives are very
behaviors.
strange. I'm very excited for like people like you guys to watch it, because I think it's going to create a set of incentives and a style of gameplay that has never been seen before, because no one's ever been given this type of incentive before.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that it's also an actual game. I think that's huge, for me at least.
No, same. Listen, and I love chaos. So to me, that's what felt most
Definitely have that.
exciting. Because to me, everything else, you're like, oh, I can, there is a script. Eventually you can make, you can do X, Y, and Z, and it can work, especially with the mole, the traders, blah, blah, blah. But boy, everyone being the snitch is so exciting. And I love watching people think they know what they're saying and they're just being completely wrong. That is what I find really exciting for these shows. So here I am, ready to go.
Is this the kind like, how long do you guys plan to sort of like continue to experiment in this general genre? Like, is this a direction you want to keep going in?
As long as people pay us to make more stuff in the genre.
As long as people want to watch, yeah. I think it's like
yeah.
I think like as long as people want to watch, as long as we get the opportunity to do it, and like as long as we have ideas that we're excited about. Like
I think we ourselves very much enjoy risky, experimental, innovative stuff. And so far that's worked out.
I think it's crucial. I mean, I've for a long time covered a lot of reality television, competition shows especially, and I think that they often have like a time limit. Like there's an initial interest because the concept is interesting, and then the concept dries out really quickly, and the
After
shows get
season one.
canceled. And the only ones that have survived are the legacy ones, or the ones with like a really, really unique premise. And so the fact that you guys are able to continually sort of like put thought into game design and concepts, I think is a huge part of like why it's so fun to watch every season, and you're still coming up with new fun ideas. So, all right. Sasha, you had one silly question.
Yes, I had one. Listen, and this is for the stands out there. I know y'all have probably been asked this to death, whatever. I just have to ask. Was there an alcohol task? Did it come up? Was there ever going to be one?
The wine
Sasha,
tasting.
a careful viewer would know.
Yes, there was a wine taste, but I
that-
just mean to get wasted. You know what I mean? I missed that.
There was another
Get
one.
wine drunk.
Okay.
There was one in Tasmania, I think,
Mhm.
that involved.
Oh, yeah, wasn't it?
Was there? I have all these screenshots.
Wait, no. I think that
Did we
it
cut
was a
that?
draft, but there was beer pong in Tasmania, which didn't come up. And there was a version of a challenge that we ultimately didn't put on, which was that you had to like walk up what are called a shot tower
Ooh.
which are like these tall, skinny
Oh, yeah.
towers.
Less
I think they
exciting
used to
than it
make like
sounds.
bullets or something. And it was going to be like you were trying to make it to the top while you were like rolling a dice or something. But anyway, every time something went wrong, you had to like take a shot, I think, like as you were going up. But then we changed it, and it ended up being something different because it was too much.
Yeah, it never even
But yeah,
came
I
up.
think those were the 2, right?
There were like 96
Valid.
challenges that we wrote for this, and so there were a couple involved alcohol for sure.
Yeah, I had to ask. Okay, the wine one, I was like, that's cute, but I missed the like full on, getting drunk and acting.
Sure.
It'll happen.
Yeah.
It'll-
Oh, it better.
People, how does it feel to have people just love watching you get wasted?
Like it's easy. I'm glad that people are easy to please.
Thanks.
Yeah.
You get me. Listen, y'all are very smart and you do everything great, but also you're messy in that way. That's why this feels exciting. Okay, that's all.
All right. Well, that's what we have then for the jet laggers here. Toby, Ben, Adam, and Sam. Thank you all so much for joining us. It's been great.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hopefully it was an honor for you to be on the #1 jet lag podcast.
It
It
was
was.
finally.
It was
Finally.
more so intimidating, really.
Sometimes, we do our best, but our level of podcast celebrity is certainly intimidating at times.
I can't. This is unserious. Okay.
It was very fun to hear the reaction to us on your podcast, which everyone should of course check out, the the Layover podcast, which
You
we will
didn't
not
believe
censor.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The and so
You can live bleep. See, this is what I was wondering when I heard you do this bit.
Oh, yeah.
If you were able to do a live bleep, because Sasha had a big reaction to it, and I was like, man, she's really playing it up. If this is being put
never.
in post, because we can't live bleep.
No, we don't have that kind of
post-
technology.
I mean,
that's the kind of technology of
you
access
don't get
to
when you're the number
one.
two.
Right, you're the #1 challenge. Yeah.
Please do not get this man started on his soundboard. That is truly my nemesis. Y'all don't watch the Big Brother coverage, but this man with the soundboard on Big Brother coverage.
Oh, no, it's
I know
it's
he's
all
gonna-
great. It's all fine. It's nothing weird on the soundboard.
That's still the best thing you have on there.
All right. So of course, go to Nebula. That's the best way to support jet lag, right?
Yes, and the Getaway is a Nebula exclusive. It will
Yes.
only be on Nebula. So if you want to watch that, then you gotta be on Nebula, baby.
Yeah, and I think if anything, that's even more appealing to our audience. So
Yes.
you got to get onto Nebula, check out the Getaway. Anything else you guys want to plug before we wrap up?
I want to plug Toby.
Yes.
Yeah,
favorite channel
titties.
is
Hello.
Go watch Toby on media.
Yeah, you can find me on my own channel.
Poor
We had
Debbie.
a
Which is-
discussion earlier in the season where I felt like Toby should have won a lot more awards generally than she has kind of
I agree
in her
with that.
career. So if you're in charge of any awards, I'd like you to consider giving one to Toby.
Season 10 is all I need to win. That's the Pinnacle Award.
The kangaroo.
That PNG, that's really valuable.
Yeah.
Toby's channel is very fun and
Serious.
like immaculate vibes as well.
Thank you, guys.
Like the best vibes. All right. Well, thank you all again for joining us here this season on our first season of jet lag coverage. Maybe we'll be back for another one. We'll see. But in the meantime, thank you. And we'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.